Chapter 5, Maintenance Introduction. This chapter describes maintenance, which includes the instruction, disassembly, cleaning, inspection, repair, assembly, special tools. Refer to Manual 36405, listing the special tools required for the maintenance overhaul. General inspection. Use care and handling of the governor to avoid damage to the drive shaft, oil seal, bearings, and other internal parts of the surface. Place the governor and supporting blocks. Do not strike them with do not strike the drive shaft. 1. Drain the oil, if any of them. The governor. Clean the exterior surface using the cloth motion with the cloth solvent. Do not remove disturb the position of the screw brackets, etc., which function adjustment design, nor disassemble the various linkages further than required to effect the removal unless replacement component parts are necessary. 4. Do not remove the press fit parts such as bearings, locating the dowel pins, oil pump, check valve, pivot pins, unless the replacement is necessary. Removal is required. Ineffective assembly, removal of the other parts. Discard. Do not reuse the gasket, perform packaging, O-rings, oil seal, copper, sealing washers, retaining rings, cotter pins, or roller, spiral pins, etc. Remove the process disassembly. Alright, disassembly. Place the governor on some type of stand to protect the drive shaft and hold the governor in position to be worked on. Remove the cover, 2 screws. Overriding solenoid bracket is present with remove it. Figure 5.1. Remove the solenoid pack. 5.2. Disconnect the wires to the terminal block. Remove the 3 screws from the secure solenoid pack to the column. Lift off the solenoid pack. Review. Figure 5.1 shows the fuel limiter, the lube, oil, shutdown plunger screws, and terminal block with the overriding solenoid brackets. Figure 5.2 shows the solenoid pack, the screw lock washer and flat washer. Remove the fuel limiter. Figure 5.3. Remove the shutdown limiter nuts bushing. Remove the load spring. Remove the 2 screws. Disconnect the load control floating lever to the tail rod. Disconnect the loading control floating lever to the load control link. Disconnect the air connection couple. Lift off the fuel limiter assembly. Figure 5.4. Lift off the overriding solenoid spring. ORS and piston. Figure 5.5. Lift off the load control bushing spring gasket. 5.6. Alright, 5.3, you see the fuel limiter installed with the tail rod, air connection, coupling spring screw, load control floating lever, load control linkage, shutdown nuts and nuts. Fuel limiter, figure 5.4 shows the fuel limiter assembly, the shutdown nuts. Figure 5 shows the overriding solenoid spring and piston. Figure 5.6, the load controlling bushing and spring and gasket. Figure 5, remove the triangular plate with the speed setting of the cylinder field in Figure 5.7. Remove the 2 screws, remove the pin connection with the restoring the link of the restoring lever, lifting off the speed setting cylinder. Figure 5.8. Figure 5.7 shows the triangular plate, speed setting cylinder installed, the screws, the speed setting cylinder, restoring lever pin, restoring link of the triangular plate. 5.8, the speed setting the cylinder and the triangular plate, speed setting cylinder, triangular plate, and the 6, remove the 2 screws, lift off the time, the delay with the figure 5.9 and 5.10. 5.9, timing delay mechanism, bypass valve screw timing delay pointer. 5.10, timing delay mechanism and speed settings pilot valve assembly. 7, liftoff speed settings, plunger pushing, floating lever, and float spring. Figure 5.10, remove the bypass valve. 5.9 and 5.11. Figure 5.11 is the bypass valve. Remove the side plate, cover the 12 screws. The figure 5.12. You have your vane servo meter, contact plate, indicator assembly, governor side plate, screw washer, insulator, resistor pack, the gasket, and with the resistor pack screws. Figure 5.12 shows the vano separator, the beam spring plate, the ceramic resistor vane servo motor terminal board, governor side plate, gasket, and side plate. Figure 10 shows the remove of the vane servo with the figure 13 and figure 14. The vane servo, oil filter screws, lube oil cover screws, screws. 5.14, lube oil covers diaphragm. You have the servo plate, the bellow frame, diaphragm, the spring, lube oil cover. And then the next down below that, you see the note: the single bellow frame diaphragm may be in your governor with a single diaphragm and shaft. Remove the snap of the ring, lift out the contact plate indicator assembly, figure 5.12. Remove the 2 screws under the contact plate, 2 screws in the spacer at the end of the resistor pack. Remove the resistor pack, figure 12, 5.12. Remove the 4 screws and oil filter, figure 5.13. 14, remove the lube oil, cover the spring gasket and diaphragm, figure 5.13, 5.14. Important. If the cover will not come off, remove the adjusting screw from the center of the cover. Notice that be careful not to damage the bellow frame diaphragm when removing it. 15. Remove the side of the plate with the gasket along with the pressure reducing valve sleeve with the plunger springing the column of the figure 5.15. 515 shows the side plate with the vane housing, vane servo plate with the gasket, spring sleeve, and plunger pressure reducing valve. Figure 16, remove the lube oil valve, bushing, piston, spring, and gasket. Figure 516. 516 lube oil, low lube oil and timing valve, screws, column, gasket, spring, oil shutdown, piston valve, bushing, and then you have your timing valve settings with the instruction plate, screw, retainer plate, need valve, and need valve body. 17, remove the screw and plates and lifting out of the time valve. 18, remove the forward screw of the water box present with disconnect the bottom of both tubes of the column, then separate the column for the power case, figure 5. 16, lift the ball head assembly out of the power case, figure 5. 17, 517, the power case on the power servo, ball head assembly, power case, screw, drive slot, and then seals, spring, seat, and spring. 20. Remove the spring seat and seal. Figure 5. 17. Remove 4 screws. Remove the 2 screws water box from the power case. Then separate the power servo from the power case. Remove the spring seat and the simmering from the power servo side of the power case. Figure 518. 518 shows the compensation system. The power case is the O-ring plug and the snap ring going in from the spring seat, spring, buffer piston, and spring. 23. Remove the snap ring, O-ring, spring, and the buffer spring. 518. Turn on the power cut case upside, remove 8 screws, lift off the base of figure 517. Important, if the base does not separate easily with the power case, use the screwdriver and slap them to pry the part. 25. Remove the 3 screws, retainer plate, lift off the drive shaft, the shield with the gasket, figure 5. 19. Retainer plate, screws, the drive shaft, the bearing, snap ring, seal on the base of the drive shaft. Alright, remove the drive gear, idler gear for the power case. Figure 520 shows the power case in the base. You have the base over here. Perform packaging, idle gear, the driving gear, accumulator, and power casing. Ball head assembly. Figure 521. Turn the speeder spring. Remove the spring and the check out the plug of the spring seat. Loosen the pilot valve plunger nut. Remove the shutdown rod. Lift off the spring. See hinge, thrust, bearing, washer, adjusting spring. Remove the 4 pins flyweights, remove the spring coupling, remove the 8 screws of the flyweight head, take off the O-ring bearing, remove the snap ring and the bushing of the pilot valve plunger. Warning, you can be injured or by an accumulator spring because they are under compression using an arbor pressure. Be careful with them. Alright, your ball head assembly, you have on the top, 12 o'clock, flyweight head gear, then the flyweight head screws, the flyweight head, the spring coupling, the flyweight, the adjusting spring, the pin, the thrusting bearing, the spring seat, the spring, the speeder spring, the shutdown rod, the bearing, the O-ring, the snap ring, the bushing, the pilot valve, the pilot valve pump, nut and spring, washer, screw, and pilot valve plunger. 28. Power case disassembly using the arbor press for the hole of the spring. Remove the snap ring. Slowly replace the compressed accumulator spring and spring seat. Remove the oil gauge. Remove all the plugs and remove the drain. Figure 22 shows the power case and oil gauge of pipe plugs, the drain, the accumulator spring seat, and snap ring. Solenoid pack disassembly. Figure 523 and 524. Disconnect the wires. Remove the switch from the receiver assembly. Remove the nut of the solenoid. Screw the plunger out of the case. Screw the case out of the receiver assembly. Remove the load spring insulator of the plunger. Remove the soldered wires of the solenoid coil. Remove the guide of the bushing of the shield washer. Disassembly all the solenoids. Figure 523 shows the solenoid pack on the receiver and the switch. Figure 524 shows the solenoid receiver and assembly, the coil set screw, the plunger's nut case, and the load spring insulator, plunger, electric, GEM, EMD guide, the insulation bushing, washer, shield, washer, and switch. Alright, speed setting cylinder disassembly, figure 525. Remove the nut and pin fulcrum screw, remove the head of the pin set, raise the restoring lever, the 2 pieces of the piston, press the piston rod out of the fulcrum, be careful not to drop the piston, remove the stop screw. Alright, piston rod, fulcrum screw, lock nut, load spring, pin, stop screw, head pin, restoring lever. Fuel limiter disassembly. Remove the snap and lift off the pilot valve with the adjusting screw. Take out the loading spring. Remove the cotter pin. Fuel limit lever, pivot and pin. Fuel limit lever. Remove the feedback lever. Remove the 2 screws on the top, 2 on the top, 1 from the bottom. Lift off the bracket. Remove the cotter pin to the top of the bell crank. Remove the bell crank. Remove the bell pin from the bell crank. Remove the cotter pin for the pin with the bearing of the bell crank. Lift off the amplifier piston, pilot valve plunger, and load spring. Lift off the sensor piston level, the piston fuel limiter can assembly. Important. Do not separate the cam from the piston unless the cam is damaged from the worn. Okay, lift off the springs and seat, bleed valve with the two L, remove the two end nylock screws and take off the bellow spacers, valve seats, remove the eccentric, and remove the O-ring, screen, O-ring, and the check valve. Remove the snap ring, washer, gaskets, orifice, and spring and orifice plate. Alright, this shows your fuel limiting bracket linkage. We'll start with the top. It shows the cotter pin, bell crank pin, cotter pin bearing, floating lever, the bracket screw, lock washer, bell crank pin, linkage brackets, fuel limiting lever pin, feedback lever, floating spring, cotter pin, adjusting screw, snap ring, and fuel limit and pivot. Also on the fuel limiting bracket linkage for the locker and washer and bracket. Power servo disassembly figure 7.5 and 7.6. Linear output servo is spring unloaded with some type of the pressure jack screws disassembling the servos. Figure 7.5 with the linear output servo to remove the spring seals ring of the seal. They're using the jack screws and some type of the pressure holding the spring ring guard while loosening the screws. Remove the pin and the separate rod from the piston. Remove the two seals. See figure 7.6 with the rotary outer servo disassembly. Alright, your 33 water box disassembly. See figure 569. Figure 527 fuel limiter sensor and bellow. You're starting with the sensor piston slide, the roller pin, lock screw, fuel limiter cam, sensor the piston, spring seat, restoring spring seat, bleed valve, load spring, amplifier pilot, valve plunger, amplified piston, copper washer, eccentric copper washer, nylon screws, bellows, O-ring, spacer strap, snap spring, valve seat. Alright, fuel limiter orifice. The housing on the bottom, orifice case, washer, gasket, orifice gasket, orifice place, gasket, washer, spring, washer, snaps, check valve, O-ring, screen, and O-ring. Alright, your 59 is your, figure 529 is your speed setting servo, optional fuel start. So start fuel limiter parts shaded. Your start shaded, but these note that these are your fuel starter fuel, nut starter fuel limited, lever limited, adjusting screw, loading springs, washer and pin, and then on the speeding setting servo, you have the base speeding nut setting nut block, Velcro block link spring, feedback washers, base speed rod pin, feedback lever pin, washer screw indicator scale, servo cylinder, servo stop, nut head pin, load control link, start fuel limiter pad, hitch pin, load control link. Alright, repair and replacement. Repair the parts should be limited to the removal of minor nicks and burrs and corrosions. Polish slightly corroded areas by maintaining surfaces using the fine 600 grit abrasive cloth, paper, or oil. Repair the work or any greater extent with the impractical part that should be replaced. Note, handle critical parts with extreme care with mating the edges surface that will not damage sharp edges, plunger, landing the piston with the grooves, metering ports, etc. must be maintained around edges and nicks. Other damages such as edges result in excessive internal leakage and decreasing control intensity. Alright, you're cleaning. Clean critical parts by hand, pilot valve, plunger, pilot valve, pushing, compensation piston, servo piston, lube, oil, shutdown piston, need valve, bypass valve, load control bushing, override solenoid piston. Clean resistor and pack with submerging it in clean solvent or shaking it around. Blow dry with a jet of dry air. Pressure the wash casting, other parts. Lubricating metal parts with liberally located out of the time of the assembly. Lubricate oil rings of the petroleum before the installation. Also lubricate any of the press fit parts, bearings, and seals before some installation. Assembly should be performed in dust-work-free areas. Replace the damaged and worn parts with the new parts. Replace O-rings, cotter pins, bellow frames, the gaskets with the new parts. Obtain the O-rings, gaskets, sailing washer, retaining rings, cotter pins, and etc. to replace those removed during assembly. Installing retaining rings and sharp edge with the direction and applied force. Use the Aerosol multi-core activated resin core solder equivalent to making the electrical connection solenoid coil. Figure 716 and connectors. Use the solid sparingly to avoid the flow of the excessive solder with a shield washer, which may short circuit the terminal of the ground. Alright, the ball head. Check the toe wear of the flyweights. The flyweight toe for the support with the thrust bearing. Replace the weight if there was a flat spot larger than a 32th of an inch wide. Check the flyweight pins for the wear of the pins indicated with the bad bearing of the flyweight. Replace the both for pins and bearings. Check the thrust bearing with placing the bearing between the race that's rotating within your hand. If the bearing fails to replace it, check the main bearing with the inserting of the toe finger inside of the inner race and apply with the pressure while supplying the outer race with the other hand. Check the pilot valve plunger next to the wears, replacing the pilot valve plunger if it has any nicks or control lane larger than 1,000th of an inch. Use the light and check the inside of the pilot valve plunger and pushing. Be sure that there are no nicks for the control pilot port. Check the spring coupling with the twisting slightly. The spring should not be loose. Insert the pilot valve plunger and bushing gear bushing assembly. Slightly secure the snap in ring. Install the springs coupling. Flat weight spring coupling with a missing tooth in the gear with one piston only. Put the bearings in gear bushing assembly. Lubricate the O-ring. Place the in gear bushing. Place the small ring. Shut down or out of the pilot valve plunger. Secure the pilot valve plunger nut. Fasten the flyweight head to the gear bushing assembly with the 8 screws. Install the flyweights of the flyweight head. Place the adjusting screw with the spring with the washer on the shutdown rod. Adjust the pilot valve plunger until the pilot valve plunger control lamp with the center of the control portion of the pilot valve plunger bushing. Figure 530 and adjusting the pilot valve plunger until the dimension A and B are equal to making the adjustment in figure 531 to keep the slightly pressure with the flyweights in both direction pin nut with the cotter pin in position once adjusted correctly. Figure 530 shows the pilot valve plunger with the control point with the opening, the controller landing off the pilot valve plunger and the pilot valve pushings. Pilot valve plunger down, pilot valve plunger up. The A and B measurements equals. Alright, figure 531 shows the pilot valve plunger adjustment procedures. The flyweight, the spring seat, and the ported opening. The place thrust pin with the shutdown, rud down race, having the largest hole on the bottom of the pit spring seat with the place in the shutdown rod. The place on the top of the speed swing with the complete with the ball head assembly. Alright, your power servo. Check the piston lightly, remove any nicks and burn small stone. Check the shaft of the wear lightly. This polish any emery cloth necessary. Check the cylinder for the wear. Remove the nicks and emery cloth required. Insert the piston with the cylinder. Press the oil seals below the flesh. Press the rod end of the piston shaft with the screw with the tip or pins. The screw on the type on the screw within a fit 25 pounds a foot, and then drill and pin with the roll pin. Pull on the tail rod, the thread with the tail rod with the lift nut onto the tail rod with the solenoid end with the piston shaft. Thread the tail rod until it is just enough clearance until the tail rod and lift nut can turn on the position. Turn nut on the lifted turn nut to secure it on position. Place the gasket and cylinder and spring in the cylinder. Use the jack screw, some of the type of the Garrett pressure and the compress the spring guard with the cylinder secure with the screws and washer. Install the scale and screw. Install the spring and sail with the O-ring. Check the knee valve with the wear with the install with the knee valve with the washer. Screw knee valve with until it adjusts the bottom of the bend back to the 2 turns. And notice that do not over tighten the knee valve and it damages the seats. Alright, you have your O-ring, seal, spring, the washer, screw, and scales, spring guard, screw, washers, gasket, springs, string, spindle, tail rod, pin, nut, tail rod, lifter, nut, washer, linear, screw, lock, washer, O-ring, needle valve, piston, power cylinder, gasket, oil seal, tamper pin, cotter pin, rod end, and then down here you have, your rotary, screw point, contact breaker, spring washer, screw, scale, lever, needle valve packing, screw, oil seal, bearing, screw, lock, washer, gasket, power cylinder, shafts, bearing, oil seal, pin and nut, pin and lever, screw, lock, washer, link, retainer ring, gasket, cover, and washer and screw. Power case and base, oil gauge, snap ring, accumulator, spring, drain, and pipe plugs, power case. Check the wearing of the gear pockets with shiny spots indicated with the side load of the drive shaft. Check the surface of the base column for the burrs and stone if required. Check if no install both the accumulator piston screw of the snap rings. Use the arbor piston press to install an accumulator spring in the seat with the screw of the snap rings. Install the pipe plugs, oil drain, and oil gauge. Use the Loctite oil threads. Install the idle gear and check with the free movement. Install the pump gear with the check with the free movement. Lubricate the installed gear. Perform packing on the base end of the power case. Place the base position on the power case with the 4 screws in the center hole, each with the side with the screw of the base with the poser screw. Tighten the screw evenly with little time. Check the alignment of the placement of the drive shaft in position. Turn it into the check oil for the free movement. And if the pump does not move freely, loosen the screw base. Reposition slightly with the drive shaft freely. Install other 4 screws. Base tightening torque of 90 pounds an inch. Nominal. Check the drive shaft to wherever the area of the seal fits. Replace the bearing drive shaft with a new bearing unless none of it is available. The old odd bearing is now damaged too badly. Figure 534. 534 shows the drive shaft made the retaining ring springs of the drive shaft bearing, the snap ring, and the seals in the base. Install the gasket seal paste in the place of the case. Install the drive shaft secure with the retaining pin plate and the screw, the torque screws up to 30 pounds per inch. Bend the ears of the retaining plate with the screws and secure screws plate. And put a new O-ring on the plug. Insert the spring on the plug into the compensation cylinder of the power cylinder. Secure the plug in the snap ring. Figure 535 shows the compensation power case, the O-ring, plug, snap ring, the spring seat, springs, some buffer springs, and spring. 17. Lay the power case on the side. Insert the power spring of the spring seat into the compensation cylinder and servo side of the power case. Be sure to bolt the springs into the ends of the buffer system. Install the power and servo. Important, when the governor is on the test stand and operating temperature, torque screw is a 40 pound for the feet. 19. Reassemble the water box attached to the power case and put all the small gasket in the top power case. Figure 536. 536 shows the power case and assembly complete with the gasket. The column to power case assembly. The power case has gaskets, bearing stud, bell head, driving gear, time valve assembly, column, bypass valve, counterbalance spring, O-rings, washers, and screws, and speed setting return spring. Alright, check the ball head drive with the gear. With the gear is okay with place the piston on the bottom of the column with the clean bolt at the time and revolve with the replace the O-ring with the knee valves. Insert with the column with the secure with the retaining inner pin. Install with the plate with the lock washer and screw in figure 538. 538 shows the timing valve, the instruction plate, the screw, the lock washer, the retainer plate, the knee valve, the O-ring, the valve, the body check valve, check ball spring, and the plug and the snap ring. The installing the bulkhead union assembly figure 539. Plunger, diaphragm, washer, nut, screw, lock, washer, bushing, gasket, piston, plunger, spring, low lube oil system install here. Lube oil shutdown. Install the gasket, plunger, spring, piston, bushing into the hole of the oil shutdown assembly figure 539. Assemble the diaphragm shown in figure 539 and 539A. Do not let the diagrams twist buckle while tightening the nut. 539A differential air lube oil shutdown bulkhead union assembly drive screw pipe and plug and plate. Also the plunger, diaphragm, piston, O-ring, spacer, diaphragm, washer, nut. Then the washer, screw, plushing, gasket, piston, plunger, spring, and low lube oil system installation here. Figure 540 shows the load control supply valve, the holding of the threading resistor packaging wire through the load control supply valve sleeve, the spring, round hole, slotted hole, and plunger. 7. For differential area lube oil shutdown roll diaphragm and around the piston of the inside of the space. The donut sharpen the tool will start diaphragm. Usually it can be started with the finger to insert the diaphragm. Assembly the cylinder lube oil system. Install the load controlling supply valve in order to show the incorrect valve of the column. Replace the bearings if required at the end of the plate. See figure 541. Brass punch bearing with the end of the remove of the cap, the reverse plate, and with the drive out bearing with the press, fitting new bearings into both ends of the plate. Figure 541 shows the vane assembly to bring a valve insert with the servo shaft, the oil seal, the bearing, the end plate, the lock washer and screw, the housing, oil seal, bearing, end plate, lock washer, screw, and end cap. Assemble the servo shaft, the shaft vero insert for the spring housing. Use new springs with the vane insert. Put oil springs in placing a housing, and then secure the caps on the housing of the screws and lock washer. Install the 3 O-rings showing the side plate figure 542. Figure 542 shows the side plate O-rings and the volume side servo side plate gasket. Servo communicator white wire retainer resistor packed with screwed. Figure 543 wire threaded into the column holes with the resistor pack wires. 15 place the gasket in position on the side column. 16 attach the side plate column to the 10 screws. Torque screws at 70 pounds an inch to ensure the plate is flatness, and the torque screws and the screw that start with the center of the work away and at the end. The thread resistor pack of the wires through the gasket side gasket and the a hole in column. Figure 544 and 545. The column mounting holes. Figure 554. Figure 554 side plate mounting holes shows the column mounting holes. Alright, the resistor pack goes with the gasket, retaining pin with gasket screws. The screw wire retainer spacer, communicator, lock washer, nut screw, and communicator resistor pack. The screw, lock washer, finger washer, spring, and gasket. And then you have your ceramic resistor. Screw split split washer spring assembly screw, the clamping plate, spacer, washer, ceramic resistor, insulator, cap, screw, washer, lock, screw cap, and washer clamp, wire assembly packing, support seal, side plate gasket. Alright, attach the resistor back to the side plate first with the two screws through the communicator. Do not tighten center the order with the shown in figure 545. Secure the right hand side with the resistor pack. Column tighten the screw on the left hand side. Communicator, insert the end of the shaft of the contact plate with assembly. 546 below the communicator side plate. Secure the retaining ring lightly. Gently contact the side of the communicator. Notice, do not bend the contactor on the plate as you slide the plate into position. Figure 546 shows the contact plate assembly, drive shaft positioning, bushing, put contact plate button, and locating lock, washer, and nut. Make sure that the vane with the maximum amount of travel is necessary. Pull the contact plate slightly, rotating the position of the teeth, obtain the maximum travel. Secure the contact plate with the shaft of the snap ring. Attach the vane assembly to the side plate, lock, washer, and nuts. Attach the side plate, cover the side plate with the holes in the top of the figure 547. Needed for 4 3-inch long screws, either on holes requiring 2/8 of an inch minimum screws. Dial plate, gasket, last gasket, lock screws, lock washer, lock screw, lock washer, screw and drain, and side plate cover. Assembly oil filter after cleaning and mount in position all the vanes, servo side plates, the filter end and plug O-ring case, O-ring, lock washer screw, gasket or plug oil filter. Install load spring seat, oil ring and end cap with the lock washer screw. Figure 549. During the test on test stands, adjust shutdown point of the initial install plug end of the cap, Loctite 242 outside diameter plug. Figure 549, lube oil shutdown, load spring sheet, O-rings, cap, lock washer, screw and plug, clean, assembly installed bypass valve of the position shown in figure 550. These parts are sold as complete as assembly. Spring retaining O-ring, the sleeve O-ring, spring retainer ring, O-ring, sleeve, spring, bypass body, pin, plunger, spring seat, O-ring, bypass valve column, 550. Our assembly load control linkage is shown. Install the snap ring and the load control bushing 550 or 551. Retaining ring pin, head pin, counter pin, screw washer, load control pilot valve, assembly spacer gasket, load control spring, load control bushing, spring ring, snapping ring and column. Put the load of the control bushing into the column on board. Install the load control pilot valve with the plunger, spring gasket, spacer. Press the cylinder head into the cylinder. 552. Place the O-ring counterbore column split cylinder into the over pilot with the stem tightened down with the screw washers. Install the overriding piston. Hold the pilot valve plunger down against the snap of the ring with the Woodward and tool 360 and 692 equivalent. Figure 553. The thread spring sheet on the plunger. Turn the spring sheet down until it touches the overriding piston, then back off 1/4 of the turn. Will begin with the rising. The spring is turned off down further thread and with the touching of the spring. Alright, up here you have the cotter pin, floating lever, the range adjusting screw, the spring and the knob and the pin, the fulcrum box, load control link, the eccentric pin with the screw, the adjusting block, washer nut, retaining ring, spring retainer, load control valve, spring lock nut, spring collar piston, cylinder and plugs, overriding plunger, springer, washer and screw, load control indicator, assembly, cylinder head and plunger, load control, pilot valve assembly, figure 552. Figure 553, spring seat tool, approximately 3 and 75 hundredths of an inch, 2,000 approximately, 51 hundredths of it, and 5 hundredths, 50 hundredths and 51 hundredths of the diameter, ended 6,670 maximum diameter. Lift the pilot valve plunger sufficiently far enough to permit the holding of the spring collar wrench while locking the position of the block nut. Notice, do not lift the plunger higher than necessary to avoid damaging of the oil seal. Install of the spring retainer with the retaining ring with right nut, one pilot valve with the plunger stand with one installed washer. Assembly of the block eccentric load control link, falcon block floating and lever range adjustment, screw springs knob. Spring and knob thread adjusting block with the floating lever assembly with about 10 turns out of the pilot valve with the plunger lock in place with the lock nut. Sorry, I'll try to be quieter.
Open that window, it stinks in here.
Alright. Check the bearing of the wear of the place replaced. Check the pilot valve with the plunger, rotating the bush if the damage aware of the replace necessary. Be sure that no nicks, burrs, or lands light stone. Any nicks of burrs of the hard Arkansas stone. Insert the load spring, rotating bush, regulating bush, small pilot valve, load spring, pilot valve, plunger, thrush bearing, figure 554. Install thrush bearing with large race on top. The D-solenoid screw, spring collar, washer seat, retaining bushing retainer with the retaining screw in the washer. Then the thrush bearing, the pilot valve plunger, the pilot valve loading spring, the regulating bushing, rotating bushing, load spring column. Attach indicator screw washer, assembly the speed setting servo 55, insert the piston cylinder falcon block, both the falcon piston before restoring the lever strap, the restoring link at the prospect is between the restoring lever, then secure the assembly together with the pin and counter pins, install the falcon screw washer spring, secure with the nut, attach the screw in the falcon screw with the pin, install the screw set screw with the nut, attach the load control link with the head pin, secure with the counter pin. Notice when doing the following step, be careful not to buckle the triangular plate, because be also careful not to warp the flat springs of the triangular plate while fastening the screw. Or you have a counter pin washer, load control linkage, falcon block, speed setting piston, restoring link and load spring, spacer lock nut, falcon block, restoring levers, pin, counter pin, head pin, load spring, washer, fulcrum, indicator washer, screw pin, set screw, nut, cylinder, and speed setting servo, set piston. Figure 555 speed setting servo. Setting the speed setting cylinder assembly in place with the triangular plate under the top of the retaining screw, screw the bolt of the column screw and the washer torque screw to 50 pounds an inch. First, fit the D-solenoid cup of the opening toward the speed setting servo, the regulating bushing, retain the position top of the thrusting bearing secured with the washer collar, springing hex head. 556 speed setting triangular plate, speed setting assembly triangular plate column and retaining screw. Alright, 35, install washer retainer screw, set pointer punch mark and column surface tighten retainer screw, limiter assembly, clean orifice and screen, replace the old check valve O-rings, gasket, new ones. The orifice plate must have 180 degrees out of the phase of the assembling in the case. After the assembly in the case, install the limiter housing, lubricate the new O-ring and the bellows, check the bleed valve with the valve setting, seat contact area for the nicks and burrs, either but the critical area of the damage, replace the new part, put the valve in the seat of the housing. With the seat, install the snap ring, install the spacer bellows, secure with the new nut-lock screws, use the new copper washer, install eccentric housing, and then insert the bleed valve with the spring seat with the restoring spring seat, sensor piston and sleeve, figure 558. Okay, insert the load and pilot valve plunger and amplifier piston and assembly the bearing bell crank, and then ensure the bell crank is linkage bracket pin and cotter pin. Turn adjusting screw, make a feedback lever in the position, floating lever of the bell crank to the cotter pin, place the fuel limiter, replace in the bracket, secure with the pin with the cotter pin, attach the fuel limiter lifter to the bracket, secure with the cotter pin, attach the linkage assembly, the housing with 3 screws. If the present assembly overriding solenoid bracket, attach to the overriding solenoid. Figure 561. Important, see figure 559, which shows the linkage around the fuel limiter. Alright, 556 shows the fuel limiter orifice for the housing, the orifice gasket, the washer, the gasket, the orifice gasket, the orifice gasket, washer, springer, washer, snap ring, check valve, O-ring, screen, O-ring. Alright, this shows the 5558 shows the fuel limiter sensor bowl, copper washer, eccentric copper washer, nylon, adjusting amplifier piston, amplifier pilot valve load spring, the bellows, O-ring, spacer strap, snap ring valve seat, bleed valve, snap string with the restoring pin, spring sheets, sensor piston, nylon screw, sensor piston sleeve, roller pin, and fuel limit and cam. Alright, 559 linkage arrangement, speeding, setting of restoring link of the fuel limiting lever, load control, floating lever, fuel limiting, loading lever, tail rod, overriding solid linkage, overriding solenoid. Alright, from the left, the cotter pins, belt crank cover, belt crank pin, cotter pin with the cotter pin, bearing, floating lever, bracket screw, lock washer, bell bearing, link, belt crank pin, linkage, bracket, fuel limiter, pivot, feedback, lever, load spring, cotter pin, adjusting screw, snap ring, fuel limiter, and pivot. Also, the lock washer and the bracket screw for the fuel limiting bracket linkage. 561, the overriding solenoid bracket, pin, overriding lever, load spring, solenoid plunger, overriding solenoid, fuel limiter, pin, fielding string, overriding lever, washer, counter pin, adjusting lock nut. 37, install the fuel limited load control assembly in figure 562 is in column. 5562 fuel limiter control column shows the floating lever, floating limiter for adjusting block, the load control. Alright, 38, attaching linkage to the fuel limiter load control speed setting is shown in figure 563. 563 shows the floating lever control, loading control link of the floating lever, then tail rod. 39 shows the pressure base, load control, and present assembly shown in figure 564. 564 shows the lever linkage overriding the solenoid, tail rod, load control, floating lever, overriding solenoid, rebalancing microarm. Figure 40 says, see figure 56 for the assembling the water box, installing both diaphragms to the fabric side of each of the other, install the diaphragm washer so the side of the radius is against the diaphragm. Alright, you have your cotter pin, hitch pins, head pin, stock block, express washer, cap screw, head screw, pin, clamp, bracket, rebalance, rocker arm, load control, float lever, head pin, pivot valves, tail rod, pivot valve strap, washer, socket head, pivot valve link, adjusting blocker, eccentric washer, straight pins, pilot valve strap, stainless steel cotter pins 2. Alright, wires, O-ring tube with the O-ring buffering spring, sleeve case, assemblies, 2 stainless steel assemblies, tubings, lock washer, screw head, toggle switch, assembly switch plate, flat washer, lock washer, socket head screw, O-ring switch cover, lock washer, socket screw. Alright, and then you have your hex nut, sock head, lock washer, water box, ringing, adjusting screw, retainer, roll pin, lock washer, diaphragm washer, lock nut, clamp, hex head, lock washer, diaphragm, ratio lever block, ratio lever, pin, needle bearing, floating flat washer, fill head, locker washer, diaphragm plate, needle bearing plunger, end diagram washer, diaphragm, failure plunger, bushing assembly, screws head assembly, flat assembly, bushing back gasket, failure, piston, spring, shutdown plunger. And that's your water box. Chapter 6 is a test and adjustment. I don't know if these have answers.